We are on Learning Outcome 6.4, and we're on the last of our three formed elements. It's describe the structure and the function of platelets. So our three kind of cellular things in blood are red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. So platelets are also called thrombocytes, and remember that platelets are called platelets, like a little plate, because they started off as big cells that got broken into these small pieces. And so if you look at our normal blood smear, these little dots of things, these little shards right here, that one, here's another one, here's another. Those are the platelets. And platelets are it says there they're not true cells, but they're pieces of cells, and they function in blood clotting. And you'll also hear that called coagulation. So what are the steps in the formation of a blood clot? Well, what happens is, let me just back up and say, it's really important that you don't form blood clots before you need it, because a lot of you probably are aware that getting a blood clot can lead to a stroke or a heart attack, or like very serious consequences. So forming blood clots has to be highly controlled. So what happens is, if a blood vessel's damaged, let's say you got injured, you got a cut, there's the broken blood vessel. They're actually the edges of the blood vessel. The physical interaction between the blood and the blood cells triggers the blood clotting to start. And so in floating around in the blood, there's this stuff right here. I'm not even going to say the name because it doesn't matter. Well, I'll say it. It's called prothrombin, but it doesn't matter. We've got this stuff floating around in the blood, but we don't want to form a blood clot until blood clotting's triggered. So when the platelets kind of run across these damaged, this rough tissue because it's been damaged, the blood starts making these clotting factors, and it triggers the activation of making a blood clot. And so what the first thing that happens is, as the red blood cells are squeezing out there, the platelets get activated by these clotting factors, and they start sticking to these red blood cells, and they start making what we call a platelet plug. And at the same time, the blood vessel kind of spasms and starts to close up, and that's what this is termed, vasoconstriction. So we have a break in the blood vessel, which triggers the production of these clotting factors that tells the platelets to start sticking together, and that tells the blood vessel to kind of spasm and try to close. So our body's trying to prevent the formation or prevent the loss of blood. And you can see that these clotting factors trigger this whole cascade of steps, but ultimately it causes the formation of these little fibers in the blood called fibrin. And here they're showing you these platelets making these little fibers, and that's going to hold this blood clot together, and it's going to seal up the hole in the blood vessel. So this has to be a highly controlled mechanism, like I said, because we don't want blood clots just randomly forming. We need them to be purposeful. And here's a picture I found. I just think it's kind of cool of, here's some red blood cells, and then here's those fibrin threads that were made in the clotting process, holding them together, sealing up the hole in that blood vessel. What are some of the disorders related to platelets and blood clotting in general? So disorders related to blood clotting, I want to talk about thrombocytopenia, and that means thrombocytes are platelets. Penia means low, so a low amount of platelets, and another disease called hemophilia. So thrombocytopenia means too few platelets, and it just means there's not enough being made in the bone marrow, or the increase of breakdown outside the bone marrow. Something's wrong, and the platelets are not enough platelets are being made, or they're being damaged. this is something that happens when people get thrombocytopenia. You might just get these, like, it looks like you have like breaking of blood vessels, but it's just little bleeds you're getting in your skin. This is again one of those little indicators that the person might have leukemia because they're not making enough platelets to stop bleeding, even when you break just little blood vessels, in day-to-day activities. So this is a sign that something's wrong with the platelets. Remember when we looked at leukemia, if you have too many white cells, you might not have enough platelets. So you can have blood clotting problems and you might get these kind of this appearance in the skin. So thrombocytopenia, too few platelets, can be caused by leukemia, and some drugs can cause that too. You can have excess bleeding. Another really serious disorder and very a life-threatening disorder is related to blood clotting is hemophilia. And this is a genetic clotting problem, and people are unable to form those blood clots. If I go back to the picture, here we have the blood clotting process. The people with hemophilia don't have the ability to make certain clotting factors. So even though they're getting alerts, their blood system's getting an alert that there's a break in a blood vessel, they can't activate and make those fibrin threads. So somebody with hemophilia doesn't have a particular clotting factor, and they can't make this clot that plugs up a blood vessel. And so here's some very serious bleeding that you can see that, it's not even open to the outside, but just, bruising that's a bleed that's inside the body. It's really serious because these people with hemophilia just can't stop their own bleeding. They're unable to form clots. They can be treated with injections of missing clotting factors. So there's different ways to treat it and managed. It's something that has to be managed throughout the lifetime of the person with hemophilia. And getting this internal bleeding is always a potential